Cannabis isn't just a plant, it's a test. And most people fail it. You've probably heard weed called medicine or a menace, a spiritual gateway or just a way to check out, something sacred or something sinful. But none of those labels really get to the heart of what cannabis truly is. It doesn't care about your opinions, it just amplifies what's already inside you. And that's what makes it powerful and risky. Back in the day, cannabis wasn't something to mess around with. It was a tool for transformation, only used by people ready to face themselves honestly. No distractions, no filters. Shamans, mystics, and seekers used it to break down their ego, not to decorate it. But today, the plant is everywhere. It's sold like candy, smoked like a fad, and treated like a lifestyle. What used to be a sacred ritual has become a routine, turning something meaningful into a show. This isn't about weed being good or bad. It's about what it does to your soul. Long before weed was rolled into joints or packaged to make money, it was handled carefully and with respect, only by those who knew exactly what they were getting into. In early civilizations, it was never just for fun. It was a sacred tool tied to spirit, used in rituals, fasting, prayer, and solitude. In ancient India, it was offered to Shiva, the god of destruction and transformation, the one who breaks down illusions so truth can emerge. Shiva's followers didn't smoke for fun. They smoked to let go of the ego. The chillum pipe wasn't just a tool, it was a sacred object. In Taoist alchemy, cannabis was mixed with other herbs to refine energy, find inner peace, and spark visionary dreams. It wasn't used to dull the senses, but to awaken deeper awareness. Ancient texts called it a spirit ally, something that could sharpen insight or upset your balance depending on your inner state. If you weren't ready, it wasn't a gift, it was a test. Sufi mystics used hashish in ceremonies to dissolve the self and connect with the divine. Even among them, the plant was controversial. They warned about intoxication that feels like awakening but leaves the soul untouched. The plant was respected only when it helped destroy the ego, not boost it. It had to be handled carefully, or it would cut the one who held it. For Rastafarians, cannabis, called ganja, is the herb of wisdom and healing. It's not just smoked, it's prayed over and used in deep conversations where words and smoke rise together in search of truth. It's a tool for connection, not escape, always part of the ritual. In those sacred circles, cannabis isn't about forgetting the world, it's about remembering the divine in it. But today, in the modern West, the sacred has become a souvenir. What once required preparation now requires nothing. You can buy weed at a drive-thru, light up between texts, and scroll through meaningless content while floating in a fake calm. The plant is the same, but the context has changed. Without ceremony, cannabis loses its direction. When the ritual disappears, all that's left is the feeling, and feeling without meaning turns into indulgence. The danger isn't the plant itself. It's that we treat something once sacred like entertainment. Cannabis doesn't give you the same experience every time. It amplifies. If you're centered, it deepens you. If you're lost, it makes the confusion worse. Most people don't realize they're walking into a temple with muddy feet, wondering why all they see are shadows. There's a lot about cannabis in ancient mystical traditions we can't share here. We've included some of it in our newsletter. Check the links below if you want to learn more. And for a limited time, you can get a free copy of the Kybalion. The truth is, the plant doesn't decide where it takes you. It holds up a mirror. That mirror reflects everything: your fears, your pain, your unanswered questions. It doesn't care about your mood. It cares about your intention. That's why in most traditions, the real ritual was the preparation: fasting, chanting, silence, cleansing, all before the first inhale. Not because of superstition, but because they knew your mind has to be steady before it can expand. Used with respect, cannabis isn't a drug, it's a door. But doors lead both ways. They open to light and to shadow. And the biggest mistake is thinking you can handle both without preparing for either. There's a reason so many people feel anxious, paranoid, or like they're being watched when they smoke. Most blame bad weed, wrong dose, or chemistry. But what if it's not the weed? What if the plant is doing exactly what it was meant to do, cutting through the noise, breaking illusions, and showing what's really underneath? Carl Jung called this the shadow. The parts of your mind you've pushed away, forgotten, or never dared to face. Not evil, just uncomfortable. Not cruel, just inconvenient. It's your grief you didn't deal with. The anger you swallowed, the truths you couldn't handle. The plant doesn't create these things, it reveals them. Like an amplifier, it doesn't make the music, it just makes it louder. Cannabis just makes what's already inside you louder. And for a lot of people, what's inside is unresolved pain. This is the part about cannabis nobody really wants to talk about because it doesn't sell as well as relaxation or good vibes. But ask any serious spiritual person, and they'll tell you that real awakening always starts in the hard, uncomfortable places. Not in visions or light, but in facing your struggles head on. And cannabis, when used with intention, can be a powerful tool for that. But only if you're ready. Only if you're willing to look at yourself honestly, without any masks. In spiritual psychology, this moment of being exposed is sacred. It's not failure, it's an invitation. That anxiety after a hit, the feeling that you're overthinking everything, the creeping paranoia, this isn't a glitch. It's your mind's way of reacting to change. You're not losing control. Your mental filters are breaking down. Your inner defenses are freaking out because the ego's walls are coming down. But modern life doesn't prepare you for this. There's no guide, no shaman, no support group. You're alone, heart racing, staring at the ceiling, wondering why you feel like you're falling apart. And the truth is, you are. That's what the plant does. It breaks down the fake stuff. It burns away the act. If you're not ready for that, it can feel like a nightmare. Not because the plant is bad, but because the experience is real. Ancient traditions knew this. Some writings warn that altered states can make you vulnerable, not just to insights, but also to outside energy if your inner world is chaotic. Cannabis doesn't fix your mess. It just turns up the volume and brings everything to the surface. Healing can't happen without that. But if you run away, numb yourself, or distract from it, the cycle keeps repeating, high after high, until nothing feels meaningful anymore, just noisy. That's why cannabis, even though it's natural, isn't automatically safe. It doesn't care if you're ready or not. It doesn't decide who should wake up and who shouldn't. It just opens the curtain. What you do with what you see behind it is up to you. Here's the biggest misunderstanding: thinking the plant is supposed to make you feel better. That's a lie. The truth is, it's supposed to help you see. The pain, the joy, the confusion. These are all messages from your spirit saying, look at this. But since we're trained to avoid discomfort, we call these bad trips and walk away with nothing. No insight, no growth, just another story about how weed made us anxious. Cannabis doesn't cause anxiety. It reveals the anxiety you already carry. It didn't create your discomfort, it showed it. That makes it one of the most honest substances you'll ever use. But honesty isn't always kind. Truth doesn't always feel good. The plant is a mirror. And sometimes what you see in that mirror isn't pretty. But maybe it's exactly what you need to see. One of the biggest spiritual traps is confusing sensation for truth. Cannabis, more than most plants, tempts us into this trap. You light up, feel open, your thoughts deepen, music feels richer. Coincidences seem like messages from the universe. Your journal fills with insights you wouldn't write sober. It all feels mystical and meaningful. But the question is, does it actually change you? The high itself is seductive. It feels like transcendence, like peace. But feeling expanded isn't the same as becoming whole. Cannabis can create the illusion of spiritual clarity without the solid foundation to hold it. And that's dangerous, not because it harms your body, but because it tricks your soul into thinking it's arrived. You start believing you've grown just because you felt something deep. But real depth isn't about intensity. It's about what you bring back from the experience and how you live afterward. Many regular users report breakthroughs, trauma insights, feelings of oneness, or living in the moment, and these are real. The danger is when those insights just float around without being applied. That's what spiritual teachers call spiritual inflation, ego swelling around the feeling of transformation without the work to support it. In mystical traditions, this is called the false light. Experiences that seem enlightened, but are really just mental tricks. It shines bright, but falls apart easily. You think you've seen the light, but really you've only seen a reflection. It's no surprise that many long-term cannabis users start confusing insight with identity. They wear the experience like a badge instead of integrating it. They talk spiritual, quote, wise people, act awakened, but their lives don't change. Their habits stay the same, relationships don't get deeper, and their pain doesn't go away. It just sounds more poetic. The plant becomes a prop in a show of progress. Osho said, "Substances open doors that only silence should open." He wasn't denying their power. He was warning about their instability. A door forced open won't stay open, and the vision it shows can distort reality if your mind isn't ready. The high can make you feel above others who haven't seen what you have. But really you haven't seen clearly. You've just felt something intensely. The problem isn't the insight itself, it's what you do with it. Cannabis can definitely give you new perspectives, but unless those perspectives turn into real practice, changing how you deal with conflict, face your fears, serve others, and handle suffering, they're just distractions dressed up as awakening. And that's the real danger. Not the plant, not the smoke, but the story you tell yourself about what it all means. The high isn't the truth. It's just a doorway. But if you stand in that doorway forever, thinking you've arrived, you never actually step inside the room. You get addicted, not to the plant, but to the illusion of progress. And that illusion is harder to break free from than any drug addiction. That's why deep spiritual traditions never worshiped the high. They used it to point towards something deeper. They never glorified the vision. They asked what it demanded. Because real awakening isn't what happens while you're high. It's what happens afterward. It's in the silence that follows, in the choices you make, and in the humility to understand that seeing something once doesn't mean you fully get it. Cannabis offers access, not arrival. But the world doesn't need more access, it needs more grounding. More people who don't just visit the sacred, but live it. Who don't just feel the truth, but embody it. Cannabis doesn't just affect your mind. It touches what some call the subtle body, the invisible part of you that holds your thoughts, feelings, memories, and energy. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And when cannabis interacts with that, it doesn't ask permission. It just amplifies what's already there. That's why for some people, it opens up intuition, sensitivity, and a stronger sense of being present. For others, it brings up chaos. That chaos isn't random. It's the result of energy that hasn't been cleared. Think of the subtle body like a musical instrument. When it's in tune, cannabis can be like a bow drawing beautiful sounds from the strings, resonance, harmony, even silence. But if the instrument is dusty, out of tune, or broken, the plant just makes the noise louder. And in all that noise, people often mistake being stimulated for being wise. You feel more, but you're not necessarily seeing more. You're just louder inside. And when your inner space is crowded, it's hard to be clear. Traditions that understand this talk about energetic hygiene. It's not a mystical idea. It's like spiritual cleanliness. Just like showering is physical hygiene, things like fasting, breathwork, chanting, cold showers, prayer, and silence aren't extras. They're ways to clear your energy. They help stabilize your inner space so when you open the door with cannabis, you're not stepping into a mess. In healing practices like Reiki, cannabis is sometimes called a field disruptor. Not because it's bad, but because it raises your sensitivity. That can help you connect with subtle energies, but it can also leave you vulnerable. People who aren't grounded might find their healing sessions get chaotic or unstable after using it. Sensations go up, but control goes down. It's the same with Kundalini work, where cannabis can wake up energy before your body is ready for it. You feel open, electric, maybe even euphoric. until you crash or spiral and can't ground the experience in any helpful way. Amazonian shamans say every plant opens you up, but every plant also tests you. And cannabis is no different. They believe every plant has a spirit or consciousness. When it enters you, it talks to you, not in words, but through feelings, memories, and energy. If your mind, emotions, and spirit aren't clear, that communication gets scrambled. The plant gets mixed up with your own leftover stuff. Instead of clarity, you get confusion dressed up as insights. That's why so many people feel drained, distracted, or emotionally raw after heavy cannabis use. Not because the plant drains you, but because they weren't prepared. No clearing, no holding space, no respect. It's like plugging a delicate instrument into a broken amplifier. The result isn't music, it's noise. And the longer you stay in that noise, the more it dulls your sensitivity. Cannabis works like fire. When it hits a clean space, it brings light and warmth. But if the space is cluttered, it just burns things down. Without grounding, clarity, or clear boundaries, what was meant to lift you up can start to break you apart. You lose focus, lose willpower, and live in a fog that seems peaceful but is really dull and stuck. Here's the tricky part. You start calling that fog calm. You think dulling your feelings is healing? But healing isn't numbness. It's clarity. It's regaining your power, not losing it. When used without awareness, cannabis can hide problems instead of fixing them. So the real question is your inner self ready for clarity? Have you cleaned your inner space before inviting the plant in? Because cannabis doesn't clean your house, it just turns on the lights. What you see depends on what was already inside. Once, cannabis was only used when the soul was ready. Now, people use it just because the weekend's here. The change didn't happen overnight. It was slow and disguised as freedom. What was once sacred became just a symbol. What was once intentional became impulsive. We went from having a smoker's spirit to just being content smokers. The plant didn't lose its power. We just forgot how to respect it. In Rastafarian tradition, cannabis wasn't something you did alone in your room to handle stress. It was part of sacred gatherings for deep conversations and spiritual reflection. The smoke rose with the prayers, the drums, the heartbeat of the community. It was a group experience, not a solo escape. It wasn't about feeling good. It was about finding connection with Yah, God, or the source. If your heart wasn't clear, the herb would show you. It wasn't entertainment. It was initiation. In African diaspora religions like Kandle and Umbanda, cannabis wasn't always the center, but it had its place. But the idea behind using these plants was that everyone had its own energy, spirit, purpose, and vibration. To misuse a plant was to misuse its energy, and that would bring imbalance. The ritual shaped the effect. The ceremony created the container. Nothing sacred was taken lightly or without earning it. There was no casual use, only true communion. But that's not what the modern world wanted. Ritual takes time, discipline, and humility. Ritual is inconvenient, and capitalism runs on convenience. So the plant was pulled from its cultural roots, cleaned up for mass use, and turned into a trendy lifestyle product. Now it comes in fancy packaging, promoted by influencers, and sold like a wellness drink. This will make you feel better. No talk about shadows, no talk about self-reflection. Just pretty pictures, soft colors, and a quick nod to mindfulness. The sacred was turned into a product. The ceremony disappeared. Cannabis became something you buy, not something you experience deeply. People now light up while binge-watching shows that fill their heads with more distractions. They scroll on their phones while smoking, lost in meaningless content designed to hijack their brain's pleasure system. There's no circle, no chanting, no quiet moments. Just constant stimulation on top of more stimulation. In that chaos, the plant becomes fog instead of fire, numbness instead of clarity. Even the festivals that say they're spiritual, with incense, wild music, and chakra stickers, often just turn the plant into background noise. The ritual becomes a show. The ceremony turns into a costume. And the true power of the plant, the part that could shake you awake, is buried under layers of style and marketing. But cannabis doesn't care about looks. Its spirit is old, wild, and real. It doesn't care about your brand or image. It cares about your intention. Without a proper container, its energy spills everywhere, into your distractions, your worries, your hidden wounds. Without direction, it just makes your current state louder. That's why some people feel inspired after using it and others feel stuck. Same plant, different person. When we lost the ritual, we lost the structure that made the experience sacred. Without that, what's left is entertainment disguised as healing, a shallow copy of what used to be holy. The plant hasn't changed. We just stopped preparing ourselves to really receive it. The ritual was never just for show. It was a way to clear your mind, your energy, your heart. So when the plant opened the door, you could walk through with grace, not confusion. We didn't lose the sacred, we just stopped recognizing it. The biggest mistake is thinking that intention alone is enough, that if you mean well, the plant will guide you. But cannabis, like any true spiritual teacher, doesn't work on feelings alone. It responds to your energy, your readiness, the clarity inside you, not just your wishes. Too many people approach cannabis with curiosity, but no clear direction. They light up to feel better, think deeper, escape boredom, or soften stress. But they forget. The plant doesn't give you peace. It shows whether peace is already there. Used wisely, cannabis can be a powerful ally. It can help you step back from ego noise, see your habits more clearly, and loosen your grip on painful stories. But the key is never the plant itself. The key is who you are when you meet it. Without structure, the experience slips away. Without reflection, insights fade. Without grounding, openness falls apart. So how do you use cannabis without it using you? First, understand it shouldn't be your first reaction. If you're anxious, don't smoke. Sit with a feeling. Ask what it wants to tell you. If you're restless, don't run away. Move your body. Breathe deeply. Write in a journal. Only when your body is calm and your mind clear can cannabis help refine your awareness instead of stirring up chaos. Before you use, ask yourself, what am I looking for? Clarity or comfort? Truth or a quick fix? Am I reaching for the plant to explore or to avoid? There's a huge difference between using cannabis to open your mind and using it to mute what your mind is trying to say. One is sacred. The other is just a trap. The wisest traditions never relied on cannabis alone. It was always part of a bigger spiritual practice: fasting, silence, chanting, prayer, breathwork, cleansing rituals. These weren't extra. They were spiritual hygiene. They helped prepare your inner self, clear out the clutter, and tune your nervous system so the plant could do its real work. Grounding matters. Smoke in silence. Sit on the earth, put your phone away, turn off the noise around you, let the plant guide you inward, not outward. Write down what comes up, reflect, integrate. Use what you learn in how you act, speak, and love. That's where real transformation happens, not in what you see while high, but in what you do with what you see. Without integration, cannabis becomes spiritual entertainment. You chase the feeling instead of doing the work. It becomes part of your identity, and you start to believe you need it to be wise. That's when dependency starts. Not a chemical addiction, but an existential one. You forget the plant is just a mirror. The real depth was inside you all along. Cannabis just helped you see it. The real journey begins when you can reach that place without anything outside of you. You're not meant to live inside the high. You're meant to bring what you find there back into your everyday life. The insight isn't the prize. The application is. The transformation is. Can you be kind without needing to feel high? Can you stay present without chemicals? Can you face conflict, boredom, and routine and still stay awake? That's how you use cannabis without losing yourself, by never letting it become your source of meaning. When you come back to yourself as the center, the plant might open the door, but only you can walk the path. If you're not moving forward, you're just going in circles, feeling more but learning nothing. You don't need more highs, you need more honesty. Honest honesty isn't always easy or fun, but it's always real. It strips away the shiny illusions and asks, is this helping me grow or just helping me hide? Cannabis was never meant to be used alone. Across cultures and generations, its spiritual use was almost always a group thing. Not because people couldn't have deep experiences on their own, but because those who understood the plant knew something important. Without a container, its power can be unpredictable, and without community, insight can turn into confusion. The plant might open you up, but the circle holds you. In Rastafari tradition, cannabis isn't smoked casually. It's part of reasoning sessions, gatherings where the herb is passed with respect, alongside scripture, discussion, chanting, and the search for divine truth. It's not about getting high, it's about getting aligned. Words are meaningful, silence is honored, and everyone is both teacher and student. The herb moves around the circle like time and energy, the sacred wheel of life. In this space, cannabis isn't the focus, it's the bridge. The same goes for many indigenous traditions. In Amazonian and Central African cultures, even if cannabis isn't always the main plant like ayahuasca or tobacco, the principles are the same. Substances that change perception are only taken when the group, the ritual, and the intention are all in place. The experience belongs to the container. The song, the prayer, the fire, the elders, and the spirits watching from the edges. You don't journey alone. Even with your eyes closed, the circle holds you. It's not just about what the plant shows you, it's about how others help you understand it when you come back. Now, compare that to the modern experience. A joint in one hand, a phone in the other. No preparation, no grounding, no way out. Just stimulation and loneliness. What should be sacred becomes just another way to disconnect. And that's where the spiral starts. Because when you're opened up and no one is there to help you close, the insight doesn't stick. It falls apart. You think you've found something deep, but there's no witness, no reflection, no balance. It becomes a private religion of half-remembered thoughts and disconnected feelings. You confuse loneliness for enlightenment. But in a real circle, something different happens. You're heard. You're seen. You're reminded that your insight is part of a bigger truth. That what you experienced matters not just to you, but to the whole community. You become responsible for what the plant gave you. Because the plant doesn't just give, it asks, what will you do with this vision? Will you live differently? Will you help others? Will you heal? In sacred circles, there's no room for ego to perform. You can't fake being awakened when someone else in the circle sees through it. You can't claim transformation without being held accountable. There's nowhere to hide. And that's why it works. It's not about how the plant makes you feel, it's about how the experience is witnessed. The circle stops illusions from becoming beliefs. Alone, there's no challenge, no pushback, so everything feels true. But not everything you feel is truth. Not every idea you get while high is sacred. Some are just your mind playing tricks, dressed up in spiritual language. The circle helps you separate the real from the noise. It helps you check your vision against shared reality. Even in cities, you can create sacred containers. A few friends, candles lit, phones off. Clear intentions spoken out loud. A moment of silence before and after. A promise to reflect, to hold space, to not just get high, but to transform. You don't need a jungle or a temple to do it right. You need respect, you need ritual, you need community. Without those, cannabis floats like incense in the wind, nice, but directionless. The plant needs structure because it's powerful, and like any power, it magnifies whatever it touches. In a group, it can magnify clarity, healing, and vision. Alone and ungrounded, it can magnify confusion, illusions, and ego. So maybe the question isn't just what you're smoking for, maybe it's who you're smoking with. Because having a sacred container often decides if the plant becomes your teacher or just a distraction. At some point, every seeker realizes the excitement starts to fade. The visions repeat. The insights echo old ideas. That's when the real journey begins, not with more intensity, but with more honesty. Because the real work isn't in what you see when you're high. It's what you do when you're sober. Discernment becomes the new high. Not stimulation, but clarity. Not euphoria, but alignment. Cannabis can open doors. That's never been the question. But opening doors is easy. Walking through them with intention, integration, and humility. That's the hard part. Most avoid it because it's easier to chase the feeling than do the work. It's easier to light up than sit still. Easier to feel deep than live deep. But feeling something doesn't make it true. Seeing something doesn't make it real. Discernment separates illusion from insight. It keeps you from mistaking echoes for essence. In Greek philosophy, discernment was called crisis, the inner blade that cuts through lies. In Vedanta, it's viveka, the power to tell what's real from what's not. This isn't about doubting yourself. It's about spiritual maturity, the ability to question even your deepest experiences and ask, is this truth or just what I want to hear? Because cannabis gives you both, mystery and meaning. It speaks in riddles, poetry, and feelings. But if you're not grounded, you might build whole belief systems out of metaphors that were never meant to be taken literally. That's where spiritual inflation starts. The ego pretends it's awakened. It starts talking in mystical words, wearing the clothes of enlightenment, quoting scriptures without actually living by them. It gets hooked, not on the plant, but on feeling special, like you're in the know. You begin to mistake sensitivity for superiority and stop hearing anything that doesn't support your high. That's why you need to develop discernment before cannabis can truly be a spiritual tool. Without it, you're not opening to higher truth. You're just rearranging the furniture in your own confusion. The plant amplifies whatever you already carry. If you're confused, that confusion grows. If you're clear, it deepens. Cannabis doesn't choose, it just reflects. So the real question is, are you ready to sharpen your inner awareness? Are you willing to ask tough questions about your intentions, your expectations, your habits? Can you set the plant aside when it no longer helps you grow? That might be the hardest test, not using the plant when you don't need it. To realize the wisdom was never in the leaf itself, but in how it helped you remember what was inside you all along. Cannabis isn't the path, it's a compass. It can point the way, but it can't walk it for you or carry you. The plant holds up a mirror, but mirrors don't create. They reflect. They don't move. You do. And if you get stuck staring at the reflection, you forget what it was there to show you. This is where many get stuck. They stop at the feeling, the poetry, but real seekers go further. They learn to trust the quiet that comes after the high. They listen for messages that don't come wrapped in euphoria. They learn to sit with discomfort and ask what it's trying to teach. Because the goal isn't to stay high, it's to stay awake. Not just when the plant opens your eyes, but every day when you choose to live grounded, aligned, and real. That's the true spiritual practice. The path beyond illusion. At some point, every tool must be put down, every shortcut given up, every high examined for what it really was, a spark, a signal, a beginning, not a destination. Cannabis isn't the answer. It never was. At best, it's a teacher. At worst, it's just another distraction dressed up as depth. If you're really paying attention, you'll know when it's time to stop chasing the smoke and start building the fire inside yourself. The greatest lesson cannabis can teach is that you never needed it. Not because it's worthless, but because its power was always meant to reflect something inside you, something waiting to be remembered. The clarity you felt was yours. The stillness, the insight, the connection. They didn't come from the plant. The plant only peeled back what you'd forgotten how to feel. But remembering isn't the same as becoming. The journey doesn't end with what you saw. It begins with what you do next. That's why ancient traditions never glorified the plant. They respected it. They used it as a doorway, but never a crutch. The ceremony ended, and integration began. You took what you saw and turned it into action, presence, humility. You handled conflict differently. You loved more freely. You served from a deeper place. That's the point. The whole point. What good is vision if you don't change how you live? What use is insight if you never bring it into the mess, the boredom, and the discomfort of everyday life? It's easy to feel spiritual in smoke and silence, harder in traffic, heartbreak, or the endless grind of routine. But that's where real spiritual growth happens. Not on the mountaintop, but in the valley. Not in altered states, but in the daily choice to stay awake when it would be easier to check out. Integration isn't glamorous. It's not flashy or aesthetic. It's discipline. It's following through. It's knowing when to close the door on ceremony and open the door to life, and walking through with grace. This is what the plant asks of you. Not worship, but embodiment. You were never meant to depend on the teacher. You were meant to graduate. You're not here to orbit meaning. You're here to live it. To take the pieces of truth you've glimpsed and ground them in how you talk, listen, and show up when no one's watching. That's where the plant becomes your legacy. Not just a substance you use, but a spirit that shaped you. Not a high you chased, but a mirror you faced again and again until it showed you something real. And here's what's real. The sacred doesn't need cannabis. The sacred is already inside you. The question is, are you ready to live like that? Are you ready to stop searching for answers outside and start sending your own signal from within? This conversation isn't over. If you made it this far, you're already seeking more than just a feeling. That's what Insights Academy is for. Sign up for the free newsletter in the description and get a digital copy of the Kabbalon. Not as a gift, but as a tool. Because some teachings can't be wrapped up in a video. They need to be studied, lived, and embodied. In the end, it's not about the plant. It's about you. Not about what you smoke, but what you become. Not about the highs, but how you walk through the lows. The plant gave you a glimpse of what's possible. Now it's up to you. Will you chase the light or become it? If this video spoke to you, let us know by commenting, "I understood."